So along the way, I would pray and like, what do you want me to do with this? Like, my original prayer was, how do I help people better? Like, what am I missing? How can I help people better? And this is what God brought me. And so I would pray about it, and I would have these very spiritual experiences that I had no context for.
Yeah.
That I actually, looking back now, I'm like, oh, this is the kind of stuff that you read about in the scriptures, right? Feeling angels, having downloads of information, having, that kind of stuff.
For those of you who are new, those of you who have not been to my classes before, my name is Janet. I do these free classes every single Tuesday. We've been doing this for 5 years now. And the name of these classes, just in case you want to look us up over on YouTube, is Great Life, Greater Impact. We also have a website called greatlifegreaterimpact.com where you can go and get additional not one-on-one. I do one-on-one mentoring, but we also do group healing sessions every Tuesday, an hour after these free classes. And those are great because it's an opportunity for you guys to really go in deep, do your inner work, and apply the principles that we teach in the free classes and the free sessions. So if you have an interest in that, please go visit greatlifegreaterimpact.com. You can get yourself registered. You can do single live healing sessions, or you can sign up and register to get the whole year's kit and caboodle all at once. The fee for that is not very much. It's a nominal fee, especially when you consider you're getting 4 live healing sessions every single week, 4 times a month as these group healing sessions. Today, what we're going to be doing in that group healing session is we're going to be working on just doing our inner work. If there's time, I'm going to talk a little bit about allergies and what's at the root of those kinds of things. So if that interests you, go over to that website. You can check it out. All right. Welcome, everybody. These are being recorded, and I usually put them over on my YouTube channel, Great Life, Greater Impact. Feel free, as always. This is an open discussion, so we love the participation. We love it when you guys feel impressed or prompted to share things that you've been learning about the topics that we're discussing. And so we want that. Don't be shy. Don't hesitate. There's a couple of different ways that you can share if you feel impressed to. You're welcome to drop something into the chat box down below, or you can unmute your mic and your camera and just share with us on camera. We love that too. Don't be shy. This is a great place for us to build unity and community, like-minded people who just really want to get after doing their inner work and growing in their own spirituality. Today, I have a special guest. Aubrey Jones is with us today, and we met on Facebook. She had made a comment on one of my posts, and I was intrigued by her comment where she talked about the stages of faith. And so her and I got on a phone call, and we Zoomed with one another and had an amazing conversation about how to walk in faith. And gosh, I think this is such an appropriate topic for the times and for the day and the ages that we live in, as people are learning more to kind of step out of getting their faith practice from an authoritarian figure who lords over them. Instead, they're learning how to go within and to develop that inner GPS within their soul to access greater levels of faith. So I think that in order to understand how to walk by faith, we first need to have some kind of context for how we're going to choose to define and describe what faith actually is and why it matters to you. Over the last 5 years of doing these free classes, it started out, well, I'm a quantum healing practitioner by trade. And so it started out, I would do these free classes just to engage people and excite them and interest them in going within and doing their own inner work. And so then I would teach classes on that. I also do private mentoring. And as that evolved, what began to happen is that we started having conversations. The next year was all about abundance and manifestation. The year after that was spiritual awareness and spiritual awakening. We had some great topics of discussion that year. And then the next year after that, we talked all about spiritual sovereignty for an entire year. This year, I felt this prompting, an urgency almost, to talk about the divine origin of our human soul, and also the divine nature of God and what that looks like, especially those of us who follow, who we believe Jesus Christ to be as a divine being, even a God himself. And so I just really felt like it was important for us to have topics of discussion around our divine identity, our divine origin, why that matters, and why coming to know ourselves through coming to know God is such a powerful way to live our lives as we move into this new millennium where spirituality and faith-based principles and practices in our lives are no longer being governed by churches and authorities that lord over us, but more by learning how to listen and hear the voice of God within, listening to that inner, still small voice that lives within you in order to navigate your spiritual journey in this physical dimension. So I'm excited to open up this topic of discussion today, how to walk by faith. I'm talking today with Aubrey Jones. I'm really excited to get into the meat of that. Before we do, I sat in meditation and prayer this morning. I thought, I really want to get clear for my own self in regards to what does faith mean to me? What does my faith even do for me? And something that I read this morning as I was pondering and studying on that, I read this and it says, walking by faith means having an eternal perspective so that we can feel at home in both worlds. So you can look up 2 Corinthians 5, 6 through 8, and it'll give you more on that. But it says, walking by faith, not sight, means fixing our eyes on what is eternal. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. So I found that really interesting because in quantum healing, that's what quantum healing is all about. It's taking people into the inner depths of their soul, the unseen aspects of themselves, finding the unseen and non-tangible roots to sickness and illness and disease and problems and conflict in their lives. So if you have a problem in your body or your bank account or your relationships, there's always going to be an unseen or spiritual, mental, or emotional root to why that is manifesting and showing itself up in your life. And so faith is walking by faith, not sight, means fixing our eyes on what is eternal. Why is that important? So I'm going to ask you guys, I'm just going to throw this question out there. Feel free to unmute your mic or your camera. Feel free to drop something into the chat box, but be pondering on this. And you can answer it at any time in this class. I don't care. But be pondering on what is faith to you and why does that matter? What is faith to you and why does that matter? Another thing that there's a writing in the LDS religion, there is a writing, it's a document called Lectures on Faith. And man, it is a powerful document. If you don't have it, I recommend that you go find it. You can just Google lecturesonfaith.com. I believe there's a website where you can read each of the different lectures, and it's short. You could do it in an afternoon. But there are 3 things in that document. It says that there are 3 things necessary for any rational and intelligent being to exercise faith in God, necessary for salvation. And I believe that salvation is really just coming back home to self. It's coming back home to the divine identity and the divine origin of who you actually are as a spirit being, not just a human being, because there are different levels and layers to you. So the 3 things that they say are vital and important for salvation, which is a return to home, return to self. 1, the idea that God exists. 2, a correct idea of his character and the attributes of what God is to you. Joseph Smith, even there's a really amazing quote by Joseph Smith who says that men who do not comprehend the nature, I think the true character of God, cannot comprehend themselves, and vice versa. As you come to comprehend and understand the true nature and the true origin of you as a spiritual being, you will then also in turn come to understand and know the true nature of God and how you fit into that paradigm. The third tenet or principle of exercising faith is a knowledge that the course that you're on, the steps that you're taking are in alignment with your true self and also with God, because those two things are one. As you come to know the true divine character of yourself, you also come to know the true character of God. And so that's why, when people will say, I don't know how to hear the voice of God, I don't know what the voice of God sounds like. Well, oftentimes, it's just your own inner voice that's speaking to you, because your higher self, that God self that dwells within you, is one. It is in the oneness with God. They are one, in mind, in spirit, in purpose, in intention. And so listening to your own inner still small voice is the same as listening to the voice of God. Now, there's 4 points that I want to make in regards to faith, and then we're going to move into a little bit of a deeper discussion. Those of you who have answers to that question that I asked you at the beginning, what is faith to you, and why does that matter? Keep pondering and thinking on that. Feel free to journal this out. My disclaimer in all of my classes is that sometimes when you come to these classes, you're going to listen to people say things, even myself say things that maybe don't resonate with you. And maybe they do, but maybe they don't. Maybe some things trigger you. That doesn't necessarily mean that what doesn't resonate or what is triggering to you isn't necessarily true. Maybe it just means that you're not ready for that truth. And so, as always, my disclaimer is take what resonates and leave on the table or leave on the shelf what doesn't, because either you're not ready or it's not true or it's not for you. And then as you continue to open your heart and open your mind to more that God wants to teach you, you'll find that more and more resonates with you. You'll be able to discern those things. 4 points of faith that I want to share with you today. Number 1, a belief in God. Number 2, that belief in God leads to honoring those impressions, those promptings, that inner knowing, that inner guidance that comes up with you, for you, within you. It's being obedient to that. It's having a sense of duty and responsibility to the inner integrity of your soul, because that's how God speaks to you. So, a belief that you have access to God and you can hear God. Number 2, a willing to be true to those inner knowings that come through your connection to God. So that leads to obedience. That obedience to that inner voice then leads to a personal relationship with God. As you start to begin to know how you operate and how you listen and how you hear and what resonates with you, you also gain an understanding of who God is to you and who you are to God, through the indwelling of His Spirit. This is the mind and the will of Christ, which in turn leads to the 4th point that I wanted to make, which is that will produce a repertoire of experiences and fruits that are good, that will incrementally build upon each other as you walk by faith. There's a couple other things I wanted to share about that. But I feel like I need to bring Aubrey into the discussion. We just let this person in. There we go. Aubrey, I'm going to, let me pin you so that we can see your face. Hold on one second. And then go ahead and unmute yourself and let's just open this up and have some discussion about the importance of walking by faith. What are your thoughts on all of this so far? And actually, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
And maybe just give a little brief introduction of who you are and where you live and all of that stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Aubrey. I live in the Phoenix area. Um, I I do intuitive healing work, quantum healing work as well,
Mhm.
which was a lot of like that's a big part of my faith journey actually is
Yeah.
how I came into doing that. And um, but I have four kids. I I'm my background is LDS. Like I grew up a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I still actively go, but I've had to do a lot of shifting, as my faith has grown, a lot of, I don't love the term deconstruction. I think it gets thrown around a lot,
Yeah.
but it is a good term. Like, I mean, just reassessing how I understand things and what I believe and what works for me and what doesn't work for me. Anyway, so,
Yeah.
what else do you want to know? That's a
I
bit of
love
my
that.
background.
That was so
My
perfect. Yeah, it's interesting that you said that this was, becoming a quantum healer was sort of a catalyst for your faith journey. And that's exactly what happened to me. I had 25 years of autoimmune illness and some near-death out-of-body experiences, which then led me to a ton of questions that I needed answers to. And I was like, I got to figure out how to get these answers. And at that time, I was really seeking for healing because I was so sick for so long, that it was in the pursuit of quantum healing, doing the inner work, going within and stripping all the ego parts and the wounded parts and healing and resolving that stuff that really led me to this spiritual awakening. I mean, it was an epiphany for me that helped me to reconnect with my higher self again. Is that kind of how it was for you?
Yeah, I worked as for a while I was working as just an online health and fitness coach. I've always been interested in health and fitness. I have a biology degree. I was pre-med actually, and then decided not to I didn't want to work that hard and go to med
Yeah.
school. So I didn't end up doing that. But I've just that's always been an interest health. And so I was doing that for a while and just like networking on Facebook and getting to know people. And I just could tell I was missing something,
Mhm.
which was a new thought. I mean, so this was maybe 8, 10 years ago. Let's see, 9 years ago, something like that. So 2015 is about the time that I was doing that. And so I just was like, something's missing here. I could tell. And I just started praying about it. I was like, Heavenly Father, what am I missing? I feel like I'm missing something. Like there's nutrition, there's exercise, sure. I mean, those are all good things, but there's something. It was just like a very intuitive, very spiritual nudge. Like there's something more here, right? So I just started praying about it, and all of a sudden, all of these people started coming. Women who were, I think, all of them probably at the time were LDS at the time.
Mhm.
I started meeting who were empaths, who did energy work, none of which I knew anything about. I'd never heard of any of that. And I was just introduced to that world and read the emotion code book,
Yep.
started learning how to muscle test and how like just learning all of the things that you learn when you start learning about energy, right?
Yeah.
And but it also was like so uncomfortable because it brought up all this cognitive dissonance with my religious upbringing and what I thought I knew was true and what I thought was right. And isn't this stuff voodoo? Isn't this stuff bad? Isn't all of those things. And so I call myself the very reluctant psychic. I don't know. I don't like the word psychic actually, but the reluctant intuitive and
Yeah.
the reluctant because I like God. But I could not deny that this was definitely answers from God. And I
Yeah.
just kept feeling like, Aubrey, I want you to just go this direction. Like, just try it. Just try it out. Just trust me. Keep going. And it took me a number of years actually to really get comfortable. But a lot of that is my own healing work. You always start with your own healing work
Yeah.
before you can really work on someone else. But so along the way, I would pray and like, what do you want me to do with this? Like, what am I mean, my original prayer was, how do I help people better? like, what am I missing? How can I help people better? And this is what God brought me. And so I would pray about it and I would have these very spiritual experiences that I had no context for.
Yeah.
That I actually, looking back now, I'm like, oh, this is the kind of stuff that you read about in the scriptures, right?
Mhm.
Feeling angels, having downloads of information, having, that kind of stuff. But it
All the
wasn't
unseen.
within
It's
my, yeah, it's all the
yeah.
unseen, but it
It's
wasn't in my narrow box, religious box.
mhm.
And so I had to really, I just kept feeling, just trust me. I trust you. Your heart is good. Trust yourself. Like all of those kind of messages just kept coming. And I think that is what faith is, right? It is following those promptings and acting. It's not just feeling something, but it's acting on something when you really don't know where it's taking you.
Yeah,
Like that
because
is, I think, just the purity of faith.
yeah, faith is at its core, it is a motivator of action. And it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting too, because fear is the opposite of that. Fear is the stopper of action. It stops us in our tracks. It's what blocks us from moving forward. But faith is a motivator of action. I liken it to if you stand up from your bed to go walk across the room, to go to all the effort of walking across the room to flip on the light switch, you have faith that something's going to happen because you did that, right? If you didn't have any faith,
Right.
you wouldn't have been motivated to get up and walk across the room and flip on the light switch to make light happen. So it is a motivator of action. And I love that you shared that. So where should we go next? I want to kind of segue into the stages of faith. You had talked about
Mm-hmm.
what is faith at its core, of the motivator of action. But let's dive into some of the stages of faith. While you're pondering on that, I'm just going to
Yeah.
read. Lisa has a comment where she says, faith to me is moving into trusting without evidence of a surety. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I totally would agree with that. I think there's, kind of big in like the quantum world or the energy world is manifesting, right?
Yeah.
People talk about manifesting, they teach about manifesting, and really, I honestly think that is faith into it's really an act of faith, right? And
Yeah.
you're putting it out to God, to the universe, and then trusting that it's going to come to you. That is what faith is, right? And there's more nuance to that, obviously, but it's I think faith is just talked about in a lot of different ways, but it's all faith. It really is all faith. So I like that description she put down there. But if you want to move into faith stages, that is something I've just studied over the last little
Yeah.
while, especially as I just had to learn how to leaning into trusting myself, trusting that inner compass,
Hmm.
and then figuring out religious, like in my religious life, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And church is saying this, but I'm feeling this from the spirit, and how do I balance that for myself, my family? My husband is pretty orthodox, although I can have a lot of conversations with him now. He's a lot more open, not specifically about religion, but just about what I do, and healing work and some of the experiences I have. Like when I do healing work, angels are always there. I do a lot of generational work, and so that kind of stuff, like it's taken a lot of faith for me to be able to trust myself to be able to do that.
Yeah. To
So
step outside of the box and outside of norm and outside of
yeah.
what most other people are talking about or doing is that does take a tremendous amount of trust, and you have to be willing to step in without wavering. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, and but my family is still pretty orthodox. So
yeah.
when I'm don't feel that way anymore. And I'm still in the middle of that, kind of pulling apart, well, what works for me? What am I able to, like, what do I just do? Because that's part of my community. I enjoy that community. It's always been a big part of my life. And my personal community here, we've been our ward, our, family congregation, we've been in for over 20 years. We have a lot of good friends there. And
Yeah.
I've actually been able to have some really good, nuanced faith conversations with a lot of people there. So we just have a lot of really good-hearted people. So I still feel comfortable going and everything. But I know a lot of people who are like, I can't do this religious thing anymore because it's too confining and they're trying to define my faith for me. And
Yeah.
I need to do that for myself. So one of the things, I'm just sharing all of that because along the way, I started learning about faith stages because I forget, I think I heard about it on a podcast. I'd never really heard of that concept before, but it's just like being like any sort of stage theory. It's a stage theory, but it's specifically about faith and faith growth. And there are multiple, you can just Google it. Like if you just Google stages of faith, a few different ones will come up online. There's it's not like a science, hard and fast, dry, cut and dry. But there are general similarities within that. Like Brian McLaren is one. He was a preacher. I don't know if he still leads a congregation, and I don't even know what religion he is actually. He's Christian. But he's written a few books, and I think he may have been on a few podcasts as well. With Richard Rohr, if that's another name that he's written a lot about faith. He was a priest, like a Franciscan priest, I think. Anyway, they've done stuff together, but they talk a lot about faith stages and just that growth and and it's really follows a lot of like psychological growth stages, also maturing through as we mature through life. So, but I do have just 4 stages. If you want to, I can go through them if you want. What do you want to do?
Yeah, let's go through those. I have a few things to add, but let's go through those 4 stages of faith growth that you've studied, and then we do have a comment before we jump into that. Anne says,
Sure.
I've been there in talking about religion. I've been there. It took some time to trust that my journey outside religion was my path and way to help others. Yeah, it takes a lot of trust to step outside.
It can be a very uncomfortable journey, very uncomfortable, especially if you have a whole family culture that's very religious, or you're in a very high demand religion. I very much appreciate that.
Yeah. I think I remember the post that you commented on was a post that I was talking about being led by God out of boxes and out of boats, and how difficult that is to step outside of culture and norm and family and especially where they all subscribe to the basic same box.
Mm-hmm.
It's really difficult.
Well, and we can talk about that, why that happens actually. once I started understanding faith stages, it made a lot more sense to me, and it helped me be a lot more compassionate about all of that. So I kind of broke it up into 4 stages and kind of named them myself. But if you Google it, there are some people define it as with 5 stages, and I forget the man's name who did that. But Brian McLaren, he talks about 4, and actually Richard Rohr, he's written a number of books. He's written a few about Jesus Christ. Actually, he talks about 2 stages, like the first stage and the second part of life, the first half and the second half. So there's different ways to think about it, but I'll just, the way I broke it up was into 4 stages: childlike, experimental, independent, and harmony are the kind of the names I gave them. So you want me to just read through them?
Let's get into the nitty-gritty.
So I'll read you my notes. Okay. And I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on all of these too. So childlike would be like a little child, right? When we're children, we just believe everything that comes to us, and we trust our parents, we trust the adults in our lives. That is how children are wired. And we believe everything, and everything is very literal in a child's mind. So everything told you, literal thinking. So even Bible stories, literal. Scripture is literal and historical. And you just trust everything being fed to you, basically. And I think, and one thing to say about faith stages is that these are one's not better than another. This is just how we as humans evolve and mature, like a maturation growth, like the growth arc, I guess.
Yeah.
So then we move into experimental, and I think most people just naturally will move into experimental, away from childhood, maybe back into teenage. I don't know, as we get a little older. So it's separation of self from your group a little bit more. Separate, like you realize you're not your parents. You don't think exactly like them, but you're still part of the group, and um, even part of the group think in a lot of ways, like a teenager might be. Stretching your wings, kind of experimenting with an independence, but still outsourcing your authority to leaders
Hmm.
and parents or church or even to God. God's will, God's in charge of me. Church says to do this or that, and that's what I have to do. And many people stay there their whole lives.
Well,
They
there's a
might stay there
level
their
of
whole lives, and that's
safety.
okay.
Yeah, it feels
Yeah,
safe.
it feels very safe. It feels very safe. That's actually what I said. People stay here their whole lives because it feels safe. You don't have to take full responsibility for all your own choices and actions.
Right.
Though I don't know that people even always realize that they're outsourcing their own agency because
Yeah.
it's like, well, the prophet said this, and I mean, I've literally sat in church and heard people say, I know I will be justified if I just do everything the prophet says, like the leader of the church says. And I'm like, oh, my kids just heard that. I need
Yeah.
to have a conversation with my kids now about that. Like, I do not want my kids believing that. Because I don't, someone outside of me, because me personally, I don't need someone outside of me doing my thinking for me and making my choices for me. So, but that is because you get into higher levels, and not levels. I shouldn't say it's, oops. I shouldn't say that you have more faith. It's just
It's
like
a
the
maturity.
maturation of growth. It's a maturity, and I honestly think sometimes in different parts of our lives we kind of hop back and forth between some of these levels.
I do too.
Really, to be
Yeah,
honest.
I do.
So, and it really follows. I've had to do a lot of healing work along the way when you talk about quantum healing, because there can be a lot of emotional healing and trauma healing that needs to happen in order for this. I don't think, well, I have a lot of different thoughts. Let me get them clear. Hold on. I think sometimes we don't choose into this maturation. There are things in our life that will just bring us to that, which is
Yeah.
kind of like what happened with me. But, and I think a lot of people have that experience.
Mhm.
But a lot of times there's a lot of emotional healing that needs to happen. And it just starts bringing up, stuff that you have to reconsider and relook at. And it's not always a fun process, but it
No.
is very worth it. It's very worth it though. So the
And-
first, okay, childlike. Oh,
yeah.
were you going
No,
to
go
make
ahead.
a
Go
comment?
ahead.
Oh, okay, so childlike and experimental. So the next one, when we move just to a greater, deeper faith, is independent. You're more independent, and it can look like rebellion, actually,
Yeah.
especially to someone in, like, that jump between experimental to independent is kind of a big one. Like, it's a leap. And so people still in the experimental phase will think you're doing something wrong because you don't, like, what you're doing doesn't look safe to me, right? So because they don't feel safe experimenting with stretching their wings further and then stepping into this unknown. And that's where I was a lot with my learning with quantum healing journey. Was I kept feeling God nudge me, like, it's okay, just let go of, like, I had number of a number of impressions where God showed me that I was holding too fast to church, my religion. And it was never like just leave it or let it go or walk away. I never had that impression personally. I know other people who have, and that's fine,
Mhm.
but I personally never had that kind of impression. But it was like, no, I want you to focus, like, your focus is over here, and I want you to focus, let's do it between you and me.
Yes.
Like, you can set that aside. It's there as a support. And I think we were maybe going to get into religion a little bit. We talked about talking about that, and
Yeah.
just like what role it plays. But that is it's definitely uncomfortable because you are stepping out of your comfort zone into the unknown. But that is what faith is. That truly is what faith is stepping into that unknown and the action of the unknown. So,
Yeah.
but it can look like rebellion. It can look like you're doing everything wrong, that you're not keeping commandments, or whatever someone wants
Well,
to label that. But
it's a huge risk because if you step
mm-hmm,
outside of the traditional norm where all of those who are in that phase of faith, that childlike phase of faith, to step out of that and step away from that, you risk being shamed and shunned and
Hmm.
shushed in some cases. And so it is scary to take that leap of faith. But that you're right. You're exactly right. That is exactly what faith is. And we don't develop faith unless we step out and trust.
Right, right. It's really like trusting, learning to trust that inner spirit, right? Like you said, like really learning to hear God and hear yourself and trust that.
Mhm.
And like for me, that's taken a lot of inner healing work, and knowing who I am and trusting who I am anyway. So um so if it's difficult, that's valid. I think
Yeah.
it's difficult for everybody. It's just maturation is not always a comfortable process. Even physically, if you think of our physical maturation, not super comfortable. Like it's
Yeah.
just that's part of the process. So it can, let's see, it can feel scary to the person doing this, right? Even it can look scary from the outside, and part of that is too because you're stepping out of this, the group, right, the tribe, and
Yeah.
suddenly you're not fitting into the tribe, and so the people who are still clinging to this tribe and this is how we have to do it and we have to do it all the same then feel threatened. And so I think that's where you get a lot of religious abuse happening, or
Mhm.
control or emotional abuse kind of stuff
Manipulation.
comes
Yeah.
because of that. There's a lot of dissonance that comes up. So,
Well, there's a lot
but
of
it's
fear
really a process
too.
of learning.
There's a lot of
Hmm.
fear within that specific tribe. If that's where they are in their progression of faith, they're going to look at you and be afraid for your journey or for your
Hmm.
salvation, and want to do everything in their power that they know of to get you to come back, if not through coercion or manipulation or whatever.
Right.
It's like
And
the
especially
crabs
if,
in the bucket, right?
yeah, I've used that analogy a lot because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And especially like, I have no idea what everyone else's background is, but like with LDS, it's very much, um, we're taught exaltation, like becoming like God is a family matter. You have to do it all together, which I think is very unhelpful advice. Like it is really, I think family is super important, yes, but then that means if one person steps out, then oh my gosh, they're lost and there's an empty seat and there's all of these, phrases that get used that actually end up being quite traumatic and abusive.
Mhm.
Um, and so and that just totally is, that's a very LDS, that's very LDS to think of it that way. But um, and I don't know how other religions handle that kind of stuff, but I think that plays into a lot of that. When I mean, any really high demand religion, if you're stepping out of the tribe, suddenly you were seen as a threat to the tribe because we have to
Mhm.
do it all together, or we're all going to be rejected of God or something, whatever whatever someone
Yeah.
is believing. So
Yeah.
there are a couple of comments. I was just looking at the comments too.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
let's read.
yeah, just
Chrissy says, same. It takes so much faith to be led out of religion and to take those next stages. Sarah says, wow, this resonates for sure. She articulates so much I've thought through my own journey and clarified some thoughts I hadn't articulated yet. Yeah, I think you're doing an
yeah.
amazing job of articulating this. I do think there are a lot of people with LDS background, but just general religious background that attend these classes. And I think that what you're saying is resonating with so many because I just feel like in general, as humanity, as more light comes to the earth, we're waking up and wanting to mature on our spiritual journey and our
Mhm.
own individual journey and to develop that spiritual sovereignty. And there's no language around this. People aren't talking about it. And so it's
Mhm.
so scary and people feel so alone. But to hear you talk about these stages and share them in a way that says, hey, yeah, guess what? I'm in this stage and that's normal and it's okay. And it's just where I'm at. And we don't have to judge where somebody else is at because it's not
Mhm.
hierarchy, it's just evolution.
Yeah, and that really gets into like the next or final stage. I mean, like I said, it's not like these are cut and dry.
Yeah.
but um but um it's the harmony, or it's more or like an interdependence where you live your own life in harmony with other people who make different choices than you, and fully trust yourself, and you can also trust others that they have their own life experiences and their own journey to be on without judging them or judging yourself, and or feeling fear that they'll judge you. Although even if they are judging you, right? Maybe they are judging you, but you kind of get to a place where I feel good enough about myself and what I'm doing that, their opinion about me really is none of my business. And let's see, not feeling the need to change. This is another one when it comes back to religion, not feeling the need to change the community and allowing everybody else their own experience along the way, becoming your own personal authority in all things personally, spiritual and personal decisions. And I think a lot of that comes knowing what the difference is between where like a religion is teaching something, where that might be an idea, but this is ultimately this is a personal decision. And so a church doesn't get to make that decision for me. And just knowing where that line is, and I think it's maybe different for everybody, and that's okay. But coming to this place of harmony and peace with that. You don't need, let me see, live in harmony.
I love that
looking through my notes here.
I love that you said that this harmony stage, it encompasses having compassion for where other people are at. We don't have to point the finger and say, oh, you're back over there, you're still doing that. It's having compassion for where people are in their growth journey.
Yeah. It's really living in harmony with everyone around you. And I see it as this is what becoming one is. Like that's my background, is learning to become one. And as if you are not one, you are not mine. And it's in the scripture somewhere and I could not tell you, I don't remember. but it's becoming one. But that oneness doesn't mean same. It doesn't mean you all think the same way or you all act the same way. It is really about loving each other. And to me, this is what Christ conscious, like becoming like Jesus Christ is, how we love each other without judging each other. And we can hold space for each other and allow our own individual journeys and having compassion for each other.
Yes. We have another comment, and then I'm going to open it up to Anne, has her hand raised. So we'll just go through those two things and then we'll move forward. Sarah says, fantastic. One thing that the Lord taught me is to trust him with them, their learning and their path. And your explanation of that is so lovely, applied to the harmony of understanding there's various parts of the path and loving each other where everyone is at independently. That absolutely is the oneness, in my opinion, and what Zion really is. Yeah, it is. And I think that's what I think as humans or as divine beings that are walking around in these human bodies, I think that is what we're hungry for. That's what we're innately seeking for, is that oneness through the medium of perfect love. Go ahead, Anne.
Well, Janet, you need to stop saying the words I was going to say.
Sorry.
Aubrey, I just want to say thank you. You and I could talk for hours because, as Janet knows, I've been on a similar journey and have catapulted into things that seem very woo-woo to people. But the point I want to make is about that oneness. And even though you and I have had that journey, we also recognize the importance of where people are in their religion. So I went with my daughter and my grandkids to the Catholic Church, and I was able to just sort of rise above my own feelings, my own thoughts and emotions, and just honor where the people were, because even though they weren't on the same path as I was, and I had separated myself from religion, I could see that community and the love they had for each other was also important. So I guess I'm reiterating sort of what you said, is that just to honor everybody, because the truth is we all want the same thing. We all want one thing, and that is love, to love and be loved, and kindness, all of that stuff. I just posted this morning on Facebook. I just came back from a journey from Greece and Turkey. And the same exact thing, what we're talking about, is what I noticed with everyone there. There was that oneness. So I just want to thank you for, speaking about this morning. It's super important that we honor each other no matter where we are. So thank you, Aubrey.
Yes. Thank you.
And I echo that. Thank you, Aubrey, for saying it in such a eloquent way.
Right.
I think these kinds of conversations are worthy of having. A lot of people are suffering in silence and feeling alone and isolated in their faith journey, and they don't know if it's safe to step out in their own path and their own journey with God and their own development spiritually. And so to be able to have these conversations and give people permission, it's okay to open your heart. It's okay to open your mind. It's okay for you to be a little bit different. That doesn't mean that you're not a part of the tribe anymore, because I think true tribe is honoring where everybody is at on the different, in the different paths or journeys or learning or lessons or maturity. It's just love.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think um like religion, especially when you get to this, some people need to leave religion altogether. Some people maybe change religions. Or maybe you stay where you like I stay where I am, right?
Yeah.
But I also am open to shifting that if that's what I need to do at some point. Um and And I think when we talk about phase stages, like in some places, I'm very much in the harmony stage, and other places, I'm still in that independent stage where I don't think it's just like this one and done type of thing. I think it's a continual process. I did hear, oh, who was it? It might have been, there's a podcast I like to listen to called Latter Day Struggles podcast, and it's specifically for an LDS audience, but they talk a lot about what's good about the church, what's struggle about the church. She's the lady who started as a therapist, and what she was noticing is so many of her clients, what was coming up over and over again was the spiritual growth, religious struggles, that kind of stuff. And so now that's what she speaks to. And I think it was on that podcast, she and her husband were talking, and they do talk about phase stages, but I just kind of gleaned a lot of information from them. It's a very helpful podcast. And even if you're not LDS, it may be helpful for you too. But they talk about how like it can be like a 10-year journey for some people of like of growing through this, of like this reconstruction and deconstruction and rethinking things through, and kind of redeciding what feels like truth for you. And and so it's not, that's why I think you can have like kind of feet in both camps, where I know I feel very in harmony in some places, and then in other places I'm still maybe more considered more orthodox, but I also know like that's just what works for me, and other people, like if that doesn't work for you, then that's fine. I don't judge you for that. Like do what you need to do. So
Well, and what
so
happens,
I just say that because it feels very messy, and if it feels messy, it just is. Like you're not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
So
I think what happens more often than not with people who are exploring their own spiritual sovereignty and their spiritual development and learning to hear heaven and trust that process is sometimes they get kicked out of their
that happens too.
Of their religion. And so then what do you do? Then where do you go from there? Because if there's tremendous shunning, there's not harmony. And so they end up going somewhere else. And I think this really is a discussion developing through the maturity of your own faith journey and spiritual sovereignty and all of that. This is really about putting religion in its proper place, not necessarily to lord over you and to make decisions for you, but to put it in its proper place. Even Jesus Christ never referred to church as the way that we see church now. Like the church was referred to as, in fact, religion, according to James, I believe, was referred to as the process of helping the fatherless and the widow and lifting up the hands that hang down and serving your neighbor and being mindful and compassionate towards other people. That was pure religion, not necessarily going to church every Sunday and just sitting on your hands listening to someone tell you what the next move is. So I think this really is a discussion of putting religion in its proper place and also defining religion and faith in its proper context.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I think Like, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I know people who've been kicked out or pushed out because their spiritual growth doesn't look exactly like what the leaders think that it should. And it can be so individual, where you might be in one congregation and it's totally fine and you're accepted and they trust you.
Yeah.
And it's another one where you have this leader who is full of fear and is like, I'm in charge. You have to obey me, which is totally not how Jesus taught. Like, that's religious abuse. And so along the way, I've learned a lot about how to recognize religious and spiritual abuse too, which I think is really important. If you're in that, in a religious community, to be able to recognize that. But like you said, putting religion in its proper place, where I think some religions, not all of them do this, but some religions want to own your faith and want to dictate your faith for you and want to own your salvation and own your relationship to God, when it is not theirs to own. I personally believe that there is a place for religion. I do think it can be very helpful. Community is very important, but it's there meant to be as a support, right? Just a support for your own individual spiritual growth and your own journey in coming to know God, and in your growth through this life and learning what you're here to learn and grow through. But if it goes beyond that, where it wants to control you and tell you what to think and what to do in every aspect of your life, that's when you get into cultism, actually. But so I think it's really important to understand and understand boundaries. Really learn what your personal boundaries are and what you are willing and not willing to do, and then live that way. And then, yeah, like you said, some people will get kicked out for that, which is, I think, a gross traumatization that should never happen. That's my personal opinion.
The other thing that comes to
But
mind too, because as I'm thinking about all the people that might be hearing this or listening or watching the replay, I'm thinking about all the people who are like, but it's too scary. It's too scary for me to step out and mature in my own faith journey, because it's so not tangible. I can't see it, taste it, touch it, feel it. And if it's just me alone with God, how do I know I'm not going to be deceived, or I'm not going to just kind of float on out into the ether with nothing to connect to? And I know that people get scared about that. And so in that regard, they retract and go back into the box because it feels safe to do so. But I know because I have clients who have experienced this. They still have that wondering. They still have that, what does spiritual sovereignty and autonomy even look like? How do I stand on my own 2 feet in my relationship with God, knowing that there's all these other voices of people out there saying, you're doing it wrong, you're going to get in trouble, you're going to go to hell, or whatever it is. What do you say to that? How do you comfort people who are maybe feeling very alone in their stepping out in their development?
Yeah, I think I understand that, because that is totally my journey. That has totally been my experience, and feeling for a while like I don't know. I couldn't even like share some of the stuff with my husband because I thought I was going crazy in some ways, and yet at the same time, I kept checking back in with myself, like, no, I know what it feels like when God talks to me, when I'm touched by and moved by the Spirit, right? By the Spirit of Source or God, however you want to, lots of different words we can put there, by Jesus Christ. And that's what I had to go back to. Like, no, this. I know what truth feels like when it resonates through me. And I think that's really what you have to go back to. What are the fruits of the Spirit? Like, really, what are the fruits of the Spirit? And are you experiencing more of that as you're going through this process? And also knowing the difference between confirmation bias and the fruits of the Spirit, because sometimes just something will just be comfortable because you're like, oh yeah, that must be true because I feel comfortable with that. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It means you're comfortable with it, right? That's a confirmation bias. But so learning how to critically think about those things, and then get really in tune with yourself and what are you really experiencing and feeling, and then just trusting that. And it is scary. I'm not saying it's not, because I'm still reticent in some of those things, and I still feel like I'm searching. And some days I'm still like, I don't feel you, God. Where are you? Why can't I feel you right now? Like, I'm I don't feel as in touch. And so I think it's just, that's all part of the process. And then finding groups like this, or finding, like, there's lots of people on social media who are sharing a lot of this. It's not just one religion of people going through this type of stuff. It's all over the place.
Yeah, it is. I think it's a global thing that human beings are being invited to experience by God. Go ahead, Anne.
So I wanted to ask this question. I've asked it to Janet, and I would like to ask you, Aubrey, and I do this too because I want to make sure I reach everyone. So I'll say spirit, higher self, God. When you say God, Audrey, may I ask, Aubrey, what does that mean to you?
Sure. That to me is, and I'm still trying to figure that out, right? Sometimes I'm like, really, who are you? I ask that, like, who is Jesus? Like, who are you really? But how I understand it is a higher power that sees more than I do, that understands, than a limited physical reality. And that is very loving and trusting, that wants the best for me, that also doesn't want to control me, who they are. And to me, it's a heavenly Father, there's a heavenly Mother, there are all kinds of angels, right? But when I like pray to God, it's to Heavenly Father and to Heavenly Mother. And I also have just realized, maybe I'm a little agnostic in that sense of, like, maybe it's not fully knowable in this life. I don't know, but I'm open to my understanding changing as time goes on. And I think that's the biggest thing. And it is like I think, Janet, I think even maybe you had said, like, it's an uncertainty. Like, I don't know if that was the word you used, but it's kind of this, you step into the space of, I don't really know anymore, but I'm just going to keep unfamiliar. Yeah. It's unfamiliar. Right. And so, yeah. So certainty feels very safe, and uncertainty doesn't. And I'm sort of in this space of uncertainty, but yeah, that's kind of how I define it. Like, it is like, sometimes I'll use source, but like very loving, guides who don't want to control me, but want my soul growth and want the best for me, and are totally willing to give me everything needed. So, yeah.
I think that conversation could go on for hours, and everyone would have.
Oh, yeah, it could.
But I think the uncertainty is right, because I too have my moments of back and forth. But one thing I do know, and I don't know if you all agree with this, is that it's not separate from us. It's not separate from me. It's not this energy out there, and I'm separated from it. That is the one thing I've discovered on my journey, and I don't know if this resonates with you, Aubrey, but it is me. It is a part of me. So anyway, just putting that out there.
Yeah, I feel that too. I feel that, and that's how it's been for me in my development too, is that the more that I come to know the deeper inner workings of my own soul, the more I feel like I know God.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's great. All right. Well, I feel like we could segue into, what other thoughts did you have? We're kind of getting close to the end here. Let me just put us back there on the screen. Maybe some final takeaways. Man, there were so many other things that I wanted to share in regards to faith also being not just a motivator of action to get us to actually do something as we move down our path, our growth path, or our growth journey, but it's also a principle of power. I feel that faith is the power that created the planets and the worlds and the solar systems and the universe, really, that it is a power that moves upon the deep and causes things material to organize itself in harmony with the divine will, the highest will of God. I mean, that's tremendous power. That is creation power. So we have faith that motivates us to do things, but we also have faith that gives us the power to become gods, because that's how the gods operate, is through this power, this force of faith. How do you feel about that's really deep, but how do you feel about all of that?
Yeah, I would agree with that actually. Because you get into, like I kind of talked about manifesting, at the beginning. That's
Mm-hmm.
essentially what that is. It's a creation process and a creation power. And we're such dual beings, right? We have this very real spiritual self that is a part of God, that, right, like you said, like you go inward actually to find
Yeah.
God. Like that is where that connection is. And um but we also live in a physical reality with its own laws, right? There's physical laws that we're also living by. And um I think this is an idea I've been toying with, and I don't know how, if this is like eternally true or not, but that we're here, one of the reasons we're here on this planet in this physical reality is to learn how to create with physical matter,
Yeah.
and to move things. And um so I don't know, that's just an idea, but I do think faith is very much a power that can move things, like can move things forward, that
Yeah.
it's not just stepping into an action, but it actually does enact things as well.
It's a lot like you guys have, I'm sure, have seen the Matsuru Emoto experiment where he projects certain intentions onto water crystals, and then that water droplet, as he freezes it, forms itself into these different beautiful shapes and constructs, and all because the intention or the environment around that molecule changed. And so, I mean, this is evidence. This is the evidence of the fact that faith is a power that can move upon the deep. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. Um, there's a couple of quotes there. Oh, here's a quote from the Mentana. I've quoted this before. Maybe you can't see it. I don't know. It's called the Mentana Archives. It's an old record, a holy writ of a indigenous people in the Americas. And I want to share with you what they say in here in regards to what healing is and how healing takes place. And he takes it a step further and even says, this is how translation unfolds. This is how you become a translated being, is through this process. So I want to share this. It's just a little bit of a quote here. He says, now faith is more than belief. It is that power. Faith is that power which moves upon the deep and causes it to come together to perform the will of the Father or God. It was through the exercise of, he says, it was through the exercise of faith that the very matter of the universe was created, the matter we all have in common. Wherefore, when that same faith is exercised, meaning you act upon the intent, it is recognized by the material or the matter. This is why one may be moved upon by the Spirit to do a certain thing, and if one is obedient to that commandment, a miracle takes place. Is it done by faithfulness of the individual? No. Or is it done by the power that resides in that individual? Not at all. The miracle takes place because the substance is moved upon by that same power which it was brought into being in the first instance. And then it goes down and talks a little bit about the key to healing and restoring and rejuvenating our physical flesh, the material of our physical bodies. He says, yea, this physical body which I possess today is made up of matter that has passed through countless generations and creations just like me. And when I exercise faith, every particle remembers the day when the Creator first so exercised his will upon the deep. And behold, recognizing that same exercise in his name and in connection with his will, the very elements respond in accordance with the decrees received in that day by his own voice. So when faith is exercised for the purpose of coming into alignment with the mind and will of God, that's when miracles happen. And we can literally change the construct of our physical bodies through that power and through the exercising of our faith. I just think without faith, it's impossible to know God. And it's even more impossible to please God without faith. Without faith, it's impossible for us to create anything of substance or importance or anything benevolent or virtuous in our lives. Without faith, nothing takes place. It's like if you don't stand up and walk to the other side of the room to flip the light switch on, there will not be light. So nothing gets created without exercising faith. Okay, I'm going to give you the final takeaway. We're at the top of the hour, so I'm just going to give you an opportunity, Aubrey, to just kind of share your final thoughts, takeaways from this discussion, maybe things that you wanted to say but didn't get a chance to. So go for it.
Oh, thank you so much, Power. No, I'm just kidding. I one of the thoughts I had as you were talking, like about that creative, like a creative power that it doesn't work unless we are in unconditional love. Like unconditional love is such an important part um of that faith, and that is like coming into harmony with what is with the people around us, with God, in alignment with, like, we can't create anything unless it's in alignment to be created, right? In alignment with God, and done in the proper way, which we don't always know, but that's where that faith comes in, of like, I'm going to follow the inspiration that I'm receiving. And so but I think in order to really feel that, we have to really practice that unconditional love. And that's not something we're always going to stay in. That's a very high vibration, right? But something that we're moving toward always.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that unconditional love, if you want it to spill out from you, it has to first be generated inside of you. So it starts with self-love, and then you feel the love of God, and then you spill that love of God and that self-love out into the world around you and create amazing things with that. That's power.
Yeah.
So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your participation. Thank you for all of the beautiful comments. I do think there is a comment here I didn't read. Sarah said, this is a beautiful invitation to unconditional love, which, as we learn, we become more like Christ. There is a purpose for it all to help us become like him. It's a perfect ending for a perfect class. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thank you, as always, for contributing your thoughts and your ideas and your experiences and your love into this community. Love to you all. Have a beautiful and blessed rest of your day. Mwah. Bye, everybody.